Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I hope you're doing incredibly well, and I hope you're going to spoil yourself and get yourself something really refreshing to drink, because I've got a lovely story for you tonight. And we always love to go back to the Chronicles of Bigfoot, because that's what makes life so exciting. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, Dustin Oswald did not know why he'd done it. Why was it in life that when you made a monumental mistake, you couldn't take it back and undo it? No wonder some people like his Aunt Jo loved knitting so much. When you made a complete balls up, you could go back and undo all the stitches. You could right the wrong. That in itself had got to be a satisfactory feeling, to be able to fix the mistake you had made. But some mistakes could never be undone. Some could not be redeemed or rectified either. Dustin had learnt the hard way, the cruel way, the way that had hit him so hard where it really hurts. If that wasn't bad enough, every day he was continuously reminded of his grievous mistake. It stared back at him, brutally, with a rude impertinence like an ugly scar on his face that you saw every morning when you brushed your teeth or engaged in your routine daily ritual of shaving every day. His mistake taunted him. Looking back, he had regretted being married to that tiresome woman, Sasha Dumfries, so much that he would have done anything to get rid of her, and if giving her exactly what she demanded at the time meant she would leave him alone forever, then he would ultimately do it in a heartbeat. What about the cost? Let's just say he never really gave that a fleeting thought. He wrongly assumed that once his marriage ended with Sasha Dumfries, it would be like a nasty storm that would finally blow over, as every storm finally ends. In the beginning, the thunder screams, the lightning thrashes, trees are whipped frenziedly with a hurricane-force wind. But slowly and surely, a light breaks through the pewter clouds, the thunder subsides, the trees become calm and serene, and very soon you'll see a rainbow that you believed would never make her presence known, soon after the uncongenial storm has abated. For Dustin there had been no dreamy rainbows, no light bursting through the gunmetal grey sky. Indeed, the storm had persisted and was still raging this very day. It was getting worse and worse, not better. He and Sasha were long since divorced, but she continued to be that piercing thorn in his side. Now he realised he'd been a fool. At the time he thought he was being the perfect gentleman. He was being reasonable towards his ex-wife, Sasha Dumfries. After all, it was him who was ending the relationship. She was the one begging him not to go, not to leave her in the lurch. He had been consumed with a condemning, rather punishing guilt about ending this relationship with such a brutal finality. It made him feel like a prize jerk. But in truth, he knew he could not tolerate living another day with that tiresome woman, whom had worn him out like a pair of old shoes that had long since passed their best. Sasha Dumfries had suffocated him like a rose bush being strangled and choked by a tenacious, rampant creeper that squeezes the life out of the plant, so that slowly and surely all the light from the sun is blocked out. The rose begins to wither, wilt, fade, and finally die. He had been that rosebush with Sasha Dumfries, succumbing to her crushing blows that knew no mercy, offered no light relief. Who knew that there were women out there with rigidly unyielding arms, like a boa constrictor, that had the capacity to squeeze the very life out of you? There were probably men like that out there too, he thought. All these years later, Sasha Dumfries was bleeding him dry, without any apologies, as he was still having to pay her alimony, up to as much as $250,000 over 20 years, and they'd only been married for 10. They hadn't had any children together. He had made sure of that. More to the point, he had reached the stage of no return. He'd had enough. When he thought about Sasha Dumfries, his blood would literally boil over, like a pressure cooker. His heart would thunder in his chest, and an unbridled anger would gallop through his veins. Now he felt no more than contempt and total disgust for his first wife. Oh, how he hated that woman! No one could get under his skin quite like she could. He had tried his level best to overcome this hatred that he had towards her, but it was impossible to subdue or relinquish, despite his very best efforts. But Sasha Dumfries was like a sticky spider web that just stuck to you. You could never shake her off, for its silken fibres would latch on to everything, like a blood-sucking leech. Let's just say every month when he wrote that alimony cheque for Sasha Dumfries, he wanted to cry out in pain, as if someone had punched him straight in the groin. If Dustin's older self had spoken to his younger self, he'd have warned that naive, whimsical, well-meaning young man, who infinitely believed that marrying the former homecoming queen meant he'd hit the jackpot. Not to be so impulsive, to think beyond the pretty veneer. Don't be seduced by something because it looks good on the outside, he would have told that young man. Close your eyes, pretend she's very ugly, and then see if you really like her beyond her pleasing physical appearance. Would you accept those personality flaws on a less attractive woman? If your answer is no, then you walk away, for that woman will never make you happy, for the character malfunctions will soon confiscate any attractiveness, and after a while, you won't even find her remotely good-looking. There was a lot he would have told that young man. Look at her heart. Does she make you laugh and smile? Do you enjoy being in her company? Is she the kind of person you would like to return home to after a hard day in the office? Oh, for the benefit of hindsight, he had thought. Oh, what a fool he'd been. But there is no fool like an old fool. Of course, at the time of his divorce from Sasha Dumfries, his sagacious solicitor had advised him that he was far too generous when he'd agreed he'd only stop paying alimony when Sasha got remarried. It was simple and straightforward enough, and it made him come across as a very agreeable man. His solicitor was a man called Mr. Seamus Fisher, whom he'd engaged to process the divorce proceedings. He was a man in his early 60s, with a thick sweep of salt and pepper-coloured hair, and grey steely eyes that were shrewd and discerning, the kind of man that did not miss a trick. It had paid off exponentially to hire someone older and wiser, who could offer him invaluable pearls of wisdom. The trouble was that Dustin's callow naivety bypassed his common sense, as Dustin thought he knew better. Why to God had he not listened to that wizened solicitor? What on earth was wrong with him? Looking back, he'd been like that throughout his entire childhood, always impulsive, even at 5 years old when his parents had told him never to play with matches. Somehow their constant harping on and on about the dangers of fire had meant that little Dustin felt very proud of himself when he found a random box of matches stuffed inside a kitchen drawer. He'd eagerly taken them in his hands, knowing full well he was not supposed to play with them, but he didn't care. Not being allowed to do something made it infinitely more appealing. Dustin had snuck out to the barn, struck a match and set fire to the haystacks, feeling incredibly proud of his achievements. The results were catastrophic, as the barn was destroyed in a furious frenzy of flames. But luckily his young life had been spared. "Why wouldn't you listen, Dustin? I warned you about the dangers of fire," his mother had scolded. "I told you never to play with matches. How could you do this to me? You could have been killed. You could have died out there in the barn." Then there was that inauspicious day at the coast, when he'd gone on holiday with his parents at 13 years old. There were warning signs not to swim. The current was dangerous. But did Dustin listen? Of course not. Fortunately, a strapping man with muscles to rival Arnold Schwarzenegger had run to his rescue and fished his almost deceased body out of the water. Without that man's intervention and the CPR he applied to him, Dustin would now be pushing up the daisies, without a shadow of a doubt. The first thing his parents said to him is, "Dustin, why did you not listen to us? You knew it was dangerous to swim with the treacherous current." His mother had been distraught, exasperated, angry, but getting her son to ever see sense was no easy feat for her. Similarly, the pattern was the same throughout his young life. The teachers had tirelessly complained that Dustin would never listen. There was a stubbornness to Dustin that meant he always thought he knew better, even against the most judicious advice given to him by a very experienced attorney who knew exactly what he was doing.
"Look, Mr. Oswald, in my humble opinion, I think you are being far too generous with the alimony payments towards Sasha Dumfries. In the long term, it could end up biting you. I mean, if your wife does not get married again, you will be stuck paying these debts indefinitely, and I don't want that for you. I think your wife and her solicitors are asking far too much. Can you not renegotiate with her, reach a better compromise, something more reasonably acceptable for both parties? Look, Mr. Oswald, I know you mean well, but I'm the one that ended things with my wife. I'm very conscious of the distress I have caused her. This is my way of making amends. She's an insufferable woman. Getting her out of my hair is a monumental relief for me. This is what she wants. I'm willing to give it to her. I'm sure it'll only be for the short term. My ex-wife will possibly get married within the year. I won't have to pay her a bean after that. She'll be some other poor mug's responsibility, but not mine. I'm very confident she'll get married soon. I don't doubt that for a second. But I want to walk away from this marriage looking like a generous man who's given her a fair deal. With the greatest of respect, Mr. Oswald, don't you think it's peculiarly strange your wife has made this specific legal request? In my opinion, it's a red flag. Not really. My wife has not worked in 10 years of our marriage. She has no reliable source of income, so she wants to ensure she will be provided for until she gets remarried. I can appreciate and understand that in the circumstances. What about her getting a job, Mr. Oswald? Surely she can do that. Sasha's not worked for 10 years. It's incredibly difficult to start working after a long time, to re-enter the workforce. Besides, she's a very needy woman. She likes being taken care of. Once she's found her new rich hubby, she'll be very happy indeed. Very well, Mr. Oswald. I'll draw up a binding legal agreement for you. But I assure you that I do not see this alimony arrangement as serving your best interests, and that does concern me.
Like so many things in his life, Dustin had failed to listen to the advice of his elders, who had worldly wisdom that he lacked. Even his parents had told him so, that he had lost leave of his senses in this regard. What if Sasha doesn't get remarried? His father had said to him. Then you will be paying alimony for the rest of your life, indefinitely. Surely you don't want that, son. You should listen to your solicitor. He knows what he's talking about. In truth, at the time, Dustin resolutely thought Sasha Dumfries would be marching down the aisle happily within 6 months of their divorce, with another man on her arms. She was an attractive woman, not to Dustin anymore, of course. It's amazing how physical attractiveness vaporizes when the person reveals their true nature. It was impossible to believe he'd ever found the woman even remotely good-looking. Dustin figured that there were a plethora of naive, ignorant men out there, all too eager to enjoy the benefits of an attractive accessory on their arms, who would snap up Sasha like a hungry crocodile and marry her faster than you could say Jack Robinson. There were men not acquainted with Sasha's obnoxious, suffocating personality. They would easily be seduced and beguiled by her pleasing appearance, but in time they would learn that they had married a snake. He thought it likely that Sasha would live the kind of life where she had a plethora of divorces scattered around her like the acorns fallen from an oak tree. But 20 years on, Sasha had not got remarried, and she was not short of a bob or two either, which made the alimony checks even more nauseating. The industrious young woman, who Dustin thought only had cauliflower between her ears, had surprised everyone by successfully starting her own cosmetic range that was doing very well, thank you very much, and she was living in a very attractive house in Charleston, in a green, leafy, up-and-coming neighbourhood, with money just dropping from the sky into her lap like torrential rain showers. Dustin stared blankly out of the generous-sized kitchen windows of their West Virginia farmhouse that overlooked the prepossessing views of the idyllic countryside. It was the only place in the entire world that seemed to calm his frenzied nerves, especially when he took his dark American quarter-horse Genevieve for a long ride in the countryside. The colonial-style farmhouse was mortgaged to the hilt, while the bills kept rolling in, and he felt as if the world was collapsing in on him. He could ask his parents to financially help him out. They weren't short of money, but he couldn't do that. He'd be way too embarrassed if they knew about his financial struggles. Dustin can be proud as well as stubborn, and admitting he'd hit rock bottom to his father was a bitter pill to have to swallow. He knew his father would be bitterly disappointed in some of the impulsive financial choices and bizarre investments he had made in his life. But would he be surprised? Probably not. Dustin recently had put most of his family's savings on what he insisted was a sure thing, when within 4 years you were guaranteed to have grown your money exponentially. In truth, the investment had been a scam. Everyone had been swindled out of their money. Some people had lost their life savings, and Dustin had lost a fortune. There was no worse feeling in the entire world than having been duped by a guileful fraudster, or regretting a decision you had made that cost your family everything, and more besides. For Dustin it was a vacuous, hollow feeling that consumed him, along with a sense of dreadful failure. In the olden days, he would never have comprehended why some men, when they were facing financial storms and struggles that they could not conquer, had decided that the only way out was to end it all. Now, wearing their boots on his feet, he knew why they had been so defeated, so crushed, pulverized by a gripping despair that was so momentous it drowned your hope, stole your self-esteem, conquered your desire to even live. Dustin had experienced these bleak, oppressive, soul-destroying moments when things had completely overwhelmed him, so much that he didn't think he could get through another day. But it was his beloved wife Priscilla and his 2 devoted children that had pulled his sinking heart out of the quicksand that had threatened to swallow him whole. "We'll get through this, sweetheart," his wife had reassured him. "Even if the worst comes to the worst and we're living in cardboard boxes on the side of the road, as long as we're together as a family, we'll be absolutely fine." Their teenage daughter Caroline had been mortified about this prospect, that the family could possibly lose it all. "I don't think I could cope living in a cardboard box, Mum," she had said. "Caroline, I'm not being serious. I'm sure we'll find our way out of this sticky mess. What I was really saying is that we're in this together as a family, and we can overcome anything." Priscilla had been furious with Dustin's decision to gamble on a financial investment that reeked of suspicion from the get-go and had gone so badly wrong. She had been the one that had actively discouraged him not to gamble away the family savings on some frivolous-looking financial investment that looked too good to be true. "If something looks too good to be true, Dustin, it probably is," she told him astutely. "There's something not right about this deal. Besides, it's not good to put all your eggs in one basket," she had said. But as usual, Dustin had failed to listen. It was the story of his life, being recycled and regurgitated again and again, like Groundhog Day. Priscilla always stood by her husband and supported him steadfastly. She had always been his rock, and her most famous saying was, "We're in this together." Dustin knew that things were looking very glum, as the bills began to pile up, like the leaves under the oak trees in autumn. He and his wife were having sleepless nights about how they were going to afford to pay the school fees for their 15-year-old daughter Caroline and their 12-year-old son Kyle. And then there was Caroline's dental implants that she had acquired after losing her front teeth in a riding accident, and those insufferable, gut-wrenching bills were not funny. Dustin's wife had taken up some online work at home that was helping to conquer some of their debts. But without those alimony payments, life would be so much better. The family would be able to get back on their feet again. Dustin could hear his wife's truck, humming steadily down the driveway. Soon she was reversing backwards in their carport. He watched her climbing out of the car, with their 2 children following close behind her, with satchels flung over their shoulders. She entered the kitchen carrying a brown paper bag in her hand, stuffed with groceries she'd brought from the deli in town. "How are you, sweetheart?" she asked. Dustin didn't answer her. He gave her a desolate, despairing look. So Priscilla tactfully told her children to go to their bedrooms and get on with their homework.
Must we, Mum? Grumbled Caroline. I'm so hungry, I could eat a horse. Me too, complained her son. Can't we have something to eat first? My stomach is really grumbling, Mummy.
When are the two of you ever not hungry? Now run along to your bedrooms, will you? I won't be very long, says Priscilla. I need a moment with your father, that's all.
I know what this is about. It's about the fate of our finances, isn't it? Says his daughter Caroline dimly. That's why you're looking so woeful, Dad. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. I know we're at rock bottom, so you don't need to hide anything from us. There are not any secrets in this household that we don't know about. We know how you messed up all our savings and got screwed by a scam. We know about the alimony payments that your greedy ex-wife keeps demanding. And we know about the cardboard boxes beckoning us to move into them down the street corner.
Now that's not a nice way to talk to your father, is it? Sweetheart, her mother had scolded. Now please go to your room now, Caroline. I need to talk to your father. I'll get dinner started, and when it's ready, I'll call the both of you. Caroline's face lit up at the very mention of food.
What are we having for dinner tonight?
Spaghetti bolognese, said her mother.
Yummy! I suppose I can wait for that, but it's not going to be easy. My stomach is growling as I speak.
Dustin watches his wife chopping up onions and frying them with mince and tomatoes, as well as placing a big pot of salted water on the hob, in eager anticipation for the pasta that would soon be boiled. He enjoys watching his wife cook. She's efficient with her hands and speedy. Watching her is therapeutic. The kitchen already smells dreamy, with the savoury mince permeating the air. It smells delicious. Dustin hopes his kids can't smell it, or they'll be galloping into the kitchen like unbridled horses with fingers in every pot and picking at everything before dinner is served. So did you speak to that ex-wife of yours? Priscilla asks her husband. Did that evil witch agree to end the alimony payments? I suppose I shouldn't ask that question, should I? I already know the answer. Your lugubrious expression tells me it all.
No, you're right. She didn't agree. I spoke to her directly on the telephone. I told her I'd paid her $250,000 over the last 20 years, and that it was time to call it quits, that this agreement should come to an end. She said to me, "It might be time for you, Dustin, but it's not time for me. You'll never stop paying me what you owe me. You broke my heart all those years ago. You owe me big time." Do you know, she sounded so self-satisfied, so smug, as if she was delighting in our struggles. She then slammed down the telephone on me.
Priscilla plops the long spaghetti sticks into the water, staring at them reflectively. God, I hate that woman, she says. Look what she's doing to our family. She's rolling in the clover with so much money to burn, while we're struggling to pay our bills. I hasten to say I got the bill from Caroline's dental procedure in the post today. Another one. I didn't realise there was more. Oh my God, I just can't believe the charges. When will they stop? I mean, I've already had 3 bills from the dentist already. I don't know how we're going to pay everything. When I told you to speak to your ex-wife, Dustin, I didn't mean on the telephone. You need to go and speak to her in person. On the phone, it's easy to just be dismissive. Go and talk to that woman directly, face to face. For goodness sake, she's receiving a sound income now. Your money is cherry on the cake. Surely she can see reason.
You really think I should go and see her? Asked Dustin, looking doubtful. I'm not sure it'll do any good.
Yes, I think you should. I think you should arrive unannounced. You don't want to give her due warning. You need to get a paper drawn up by your solicitor, relinquishing the alimony payments, and get her to sign on the dotted line for you. I know you say your ex-wife is a bitter, twisted woman, but I'm sure when she comprehends the struggles we really are having as a family, she might show you some compassion.
I don't think so. You don't know Sasha like I do. She doesn't know the meaning of the word compassion. But you're right. What have I got to lose? You don't get if you don't ask, and persistence always pays off. So I'll give it a go.
Exactly right, sweetheart. What have you got to lose? 3 days later, Dustin is driving his truck up the red brick driveway towards the stunning little Charleston detached double-storey property, situated in an exquisite green leafy neighbourhood, where the pavements are exquisitely lined with the towering resplendence of the lofty oak trees. The house his ex-wife lives in is charming. It's got a classic look to it, with large French windows and a pristine, perfectly mown front yard. Even though Sasha Dumfries is annoying like a buzzing mosquito that you'd seriously like to swat, she did have oodles of style, he'd give her that. But judging by the value of this property, his ex-wife is doing very well for herself, as he'd been informed. There are pretty wild roses tumbling over the front wall like laughter, and the house is terribly pretty, as are most of the eye-catching, illustrious, opulent-looking properties in this quiet, serene, very tranquil neighbourhood, where Dustin is sure during the day people are out and about, busily walking their dogs, while kids scream down the pavements, happily riding their cycles. It is late afternoon, and the mellow, lackadaisical, lazy day is slowly burning into the evening, so the neighbourhood is cast in that soft, dim, subdued light, when very soon the sun will set with a golden glaze, only to have its beguiling light effects conquered by a dusky darkness that will snake across the sky, stealing all the light, so that another night is born. Even during the twilight hours, with the outside lights of the houses and the street lamps aglaze, Dustin is sure that this cosy little neighbourhood twinkles like a brand new pair of shoes that cannot be dulled. Dustin can feel his heart flapping as he climbs out of his truck. He always sent his alimony checks in the post, but he hadn't seen his ex-wife in many years, possibly 7, he thinks. It's been quite a while. Reluctantly, Dustin ambles over to the front door. Part of him wants to get the hell out of here. Seeing his ex-wife is not something he is greatly looking forward to. "You've got to do this, Dustin," he tells himself. "You've got to do this. It's now or never." He glances at the potted hanging geraniums tumbling over their terracotta pots in a plethora of pink blossoms, and is charmed by their pretty colours. He then reaches the dark, shining, sleek door with its bronze knocker, and chills go down his spine. He's got to do this, he keeps telling himself. At first he knocks on the door with a subdued reluctance, but then he beats the door harder with the brass knocker. And moments later he hears feet trotting towards the door. It opens slowly, and there she is, Sasha Dumfries. "Oh, it's you," she says. "I should have guessed you'd come running after that phone call we had a couple of days ago. You never did take to the word no very kindly, did you? You've had a wasted trip coming out here. What the hell do you want? If you're here to beg me to stop the alimony payments, then no can do, I'm afraid, as I informed you on the phone." Dustin stares at his ex-wife. Her waistline has thickened over the years, and her perfect, flawless complexion is not quite so perfect anymore, as a few lines have trespassed around her eyes and her mouth area. But that's not really a surprise. She was always a heavy smoker. She's dressed very elegantly, in a dark blue pair of slacks, and a cream blouse with pearly buttons. She's wearing expensive pumps on her feet. She places her arms on her waist indignantly, staring at Dustin like a cat giving a dog that warning, that if you come any closer, I'll scratch you and tear your eyes out. "Look, Sasha," said Dustin apologetically, "please can I come in for a brief moment to say my piece, and then I promise you I will leave. Just hear me out, will you?" Sasha sighs. "Very well, come in, but you better keep this short." Dustin glances around the house. He just smells money everywhere. Everything is immaculate, all the furnishings classic, stylish, very expensive. Sasha looks as if her upholstered, well-cushioned, padded life has sheltered her from every storm, and the lightning strikes of hardship or struggle have not dared to touch the threshold of her life. He could see this former home-coming queen had not changed. She was tough as nails, and she had the charm of a crocodile on a good day. Dustin could not decide what she would be on a bad day. A shark, perhaps. Sasha leads him into the living room and beckons for him to take a seat. "Go on, say your piece, and then I'd like you to leave, please." "Sasha, I've given you over $250,000 over the last 20 years. I've done the math. In truth, when I agreed to the alimony settlement,
I really thought that you would get married again. I had no idea that I would be paying for your expenses for over 20 years. You have to admit it's ludicrous.
Dustin glances around her living room.
I mean, look at you. You're living like a queen, Sasha. I can see you don't need my money any longer. You're doing very well for yourself financially with your successful cosmetic range, and congratulations to you for that. Don't you think we can call it quits on the alimony payments and be done with them?
Call it quits? Are you kidding me, Dustin? I certainly won't be calling it quits. I enjoy spending every penny of your money when it comes to buying myself frivolous, extravagant things and going out to fabulous restaurants. It feels so good to gobble up all your money on supercilious things that I don't even need. It gives me a great deal of satisfaction. You treated our marriage as if it was frivolous, didn't you? I'm doing exactly the same with my alimony payments, and I continue to do so indefinitely. I will, until you pop your clogs, of course. You hurt me, Dustin, when you abandoned our relationship, and I intend to hurt you until the day you drop down dead. You deserve to suffer, Dustin, after what you put me through.
What do you mean I treated our relationship frivolously, Sasha? That's not fair. I worked very hard at our relationship. I tried to make it work, but you are...
Oh, here we go again, she sniggers, rolling her lips down into a scowl. Let's hear it. I'm suffocating, claustrophobic, breathing down your neck all the time. Is that what you're going to tell me? I've heard it all from you over and over again. I'm pretty sick of it, you know.
But you were suffocating, Sasha. No man can live with his wife checking up on him 20 times a day and hovering over him like a buzzing bee when they get back from a long, hard day at work. Asking so many questions. You always asked me so many questions. Where were you? Who were you with? What did you do? You even checked on me with my secretary to make sure I wasn't taking women out to lunch. That is how very, very jealous and incredibly insecure you were. Your behavior was not normal for a relationship. You never trusted me an inch. I gave you no reason to doubt my integrity. You were so needy in that relationship.
How dare you speak to me like that, Dustin, in my own home? I phoned you up 20 times a day to check up on you because I was a dutiful, devoted wife. I asked you hundreds of questions when you came back from work because I cared. I was interested in you. Most women wouldn't be as bothered as I was. I wanted to know everything because I was a fabulous wife, even if I say so myself.
Really? You call that caring, do you? I felt like I was being interrogated by the Gestapo. Sometimes you got very upset if I had a business lunch, especially if a woman came along. You'd blow up into a tantrum. I couldn't help it that the business person I was seeing was a woman. But no, you got terribly suspicious. You always thought something untoward was going on. Remember the time you hired a private investigator to have me followed? He told you I was squeaky clean. But you still weren't satisfied, were you? So you hired another investigator, and then another. You were perpetually having me followed. That's not normal.
Oh, don't go there. Stop overreacting, Dustin. Listen to yourself. I hired the private investigators partly to keep an eye on you when I could not. I needed to know where you were when I wasn't in your presence, to be certain you were safe, because I cared. I was punished because of my caring, which is very, very unfair.
I ended the relationship with you, Sasha, because I could not breathe. I didn't feel my life was my own. Even when I was at home, you dictated the course of my day. You refused to let me meet up with my friends at the local bar, just to unwind. I couldn't hack living like that. I was miserable living with you under your draconian influences. That's why we divorced.
But I loved you, Justin. You broke my heart so needlessly.
You know what, Sasha? You can own a mouse and put it in a tiny box so that it can barely breathe. You can feed it, take care of it, smother it with your undivided attention. You can think you love it, But that little mouse wants its freedom desperately. It needs more space. I was that little mouse, desperate to escape your clutches. I couldn't get away from you fast enough. You suffocated me.
You know how pathetic you sound. I bet that new wife of yours doesn't love you like I did.
You mean she doesn't breathe down my neck like you did 24/7? You're right about that.
Justin opens the large leather wallet he's carrying, pulls out a paper.
I got this drawn up at my solicitor's. I would appreciate it very much if you would sign it. I will level with you, Sasha. Things are very bad for my family financially at the moment. We've remortgaged our property, have hundreds of outstanding bills. And your signing these papers would give us the helping hand we need to get out of our sticky, rather precarious mess. Come on, be reasonable, Sasha. You're not a bad person underneath it all. You don't need my alimony money anymore. You can see you live like a queen.
Why don't you go to your wealthy parents, Dustin? Ask them for a helping hand. Why would you come to me?
I can't do that, Sasha, says Dustin obsequiously. I just can't.
Oh, you're scared your father's going to be so disappointed that you've blown all your money. Let me guess, you put your savings into some lousy investment scheme that went badly pear-shaped. I'd never have allowed you to do that, and you wouldn't be in this mess now if you were still with me. You know your father's going to be mortified by your stupidity. He always said you didn't thoroughly engage your brain. You went diving into the deep end with the sharks without checking the safety of the water first. That's why I was so good for you, Dustin. I'd never have let you make those absurd choices. I'm sorry, Dustin, she says, shaking her head defiantly. Why should I clean up your dreadful mess? You spilt the milk, now mop it up yourself, and kindly leave me the hell alone. I cannot help you. Now will you please leave? You've said your piece. I'd like you to go. So there you are. That's part 1 of our story. Part 2 is tomorrow night, and it's absolutely fabulous, so you don't want to miss it. Until next time, goodbye and good night.